Hi, Marina. Thanks.
All right, and it is 12:01. So let's go ahead and call this meeting of the SKHHP Executive Board for October 20th. You guys, how is it October 20th? Holy cow. I don't know where the year is gone. Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order, and I'm going to turn it over to Claire for roll call, please.
Thank you, Chair or Vice Chair. City of Auburn, Nancy Backus. She's out and excused today. City of Kent, Dana Ralph.
Here.
City of Burien, Colleen Brandt Schluter.
Here.
City of Covington, Christina Soltis. Didn't see her. City of Des Moines, Tracy Buxton.
Here.
City of Federal Way, Brian Davis. I think he was going to try and join later. City of Maple Valley, Sean Kelly.
I'm here.
City of Normandy Park, Eric Zimmerman. Absent. City of Renton, Ryan McGurven. I think Hannah.
Yeah, I can represent on City of Renton's behalf.
Right, Hannah Bondmiller is here for City of Renton. City of Tukwila, Cynthia Delastrinos Johnson.
Here.
Thank you. And King County, Sonari Marshall.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Claire. So we've done the official roll call. I know we do have others on this call. I saw Patience earlier from our advisory board. Patience, would you like to pop on and introduce yourself?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you all for having me join this meeting today on behalf of the advisory board members. And I just always reflect back, if I can take this moment and privilege to give kudos to all of you for where we are today. SKHHP is now a public funder. And I remember more than 6 years ago where that was a vision that we were working towards. And I think it's testament to the reality that if we stand up to taking bold action, all things are possible. So I hope you take time to step aside, pat yourself in the back, and celebrate where we are today.
Nice. Thank you, Patience. We do talk about that. I think in those early meetings, remembering them at our respective city halls, having the conversations, we never imagined that we would be at the place we are now with the funding and those kind of opportunities. So we've come a very, very long way in a relatively in the government world, very short amount of time. So that's really good news. All right, we also have staff on the call. Do we want to go just sort of, if you guys want to pop on, introduce yourself really quick, and then we will move on. But I see Marina. I'll start with Marina.
Good afternoon, Marina Hansen, Human Services Manager for the City of Kent.
You want to just
Nicole Nordholm, City of Des Moines.
Thank you.
Michaela Daffern, King County. Sorry.
Nicholas Matz, Normandy Park.
Hi, Matt Torpy, Community Development Manager, City of Maple Valley.
Daphne Hernandez, Associate Planner for the City of Covington.
Laurel Humphrey, Legislative Analyst, City of Tukwila.
Did we get everybody? The boxes always move and it makes it a little tricky.
I think we did.
All right. With that, welcome everybody. We will go ahead and move on. Next item on our agenda is public comment. Claire, do we have anybody signed up or on the call that's looking to provide public comment?
No one signed up, and I'm not seeing anyone with their hand raised in the audience.
All right. Then we will move on. Next item is the approval of our minutes from our September 15th meeting. They were in the packet. Are there any questions or concerns about the minutes as published? Okay, not seeing any. A motion would be in order to approve.
So moved.
Ms. Tracy.
We have a second.
Seconded, Tsunari.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Minutes stand as published. Next item is agenda modifications. Any changes to the agenda today?
No, Vice Chair.
All right, thank you very much. So we are going to move on to board business. The first item we have is our Housing Capital Fund project application review. We're entering into our second annual funding round for SKIP. That is very, very exciting. That means we can call it annual now because we've reached our second time around. New resources available, pulled from Kent and Covington, and we were able to attract a pretty wide variety of applicants for this funding process. 6 applications requesting $8,656,000 in total were submitted. And I'm going to turn it over to Claire to review each project in order for us to consider the funding recommendations from the advisory board, which will be at our next meeting. Correct, Claire?
That is correct.
All right, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Right, thank you. And can you see those slides there?
Yes.
All right. So thank you, Vice Chair. So I do want to take a moment and recognize the hard work that went into getting to this point, as Patience said, and also as our Vice Chair said, for this year's Housing Capital Funding Round. I think everyone here deserves some recognition in the role that you played in getting us to this point. And as board members, you serve as the face and voice for SKIP for your jurisdictions. So thank you for your support and engagement at these monthly meetings and being a supportive ally of this work to pool funds to support affordable housing projects in South King County. So I also want to recognize the hard work of the cities of Covington and Kent in pooling House Bill 1590 funds this year through the adoption of their ILAs for this fund source. Because of this, we more than quadrupled the amount of funding we have available this year. And so a big shout out to our electeds, Mayor Ralph and Councilmember Christina Soltis for their leadership, and to staff Marina Hansen and Daphne Hernandez for their behind the scenes coordination of all the administrative hurdles we needed to jump through to get to this point in pooling that new revenue source. So thank you all so much. So all the information presented to you today is available in your agenda packets, which was sent to you on Friday, October 13th at 4:39 p.m. and includes summary memos of each project. So to briefly review our timeline, on October 5th, the advisory board reviewed applications that we received for the Housing Capital Fund and a summary of each project. An evaluation form was developed based on criteria established in the Housing Capital Fund guidelines and funding priorities and criteria. And we asked each advisory board member to rank how well each project met each of SKIP's funding priorities and overall criteria. At the November 2nd advisory board meeting, I anticipate a funding recommendation from the advisory board for your consideration at your November 17th executive board meeting. In anticipation of next meeting, I'm here today to present a summary overview of each of the projects, so you have an idea of what you're considering when a recommendation from the advisory board comes forward at your next meeting. And this is also to provide you the opportunity to ask questions about the projects. So assuming the advisory board develops a recommendation by your next meeting, you will consider that recommendation, and if you concur, you will adopt the formal recommendation. Once we have a recommendation from you, the executive board, we begin seeking concurrence from the cities that contribute funds to the Housing Capital Fund. So here is a high-level summary of the 6 applications that we received. We have a really good geographic diversity represented, and even the size of the projects vary greatly from 20 units to 199 units in a single project. There's a mix of new construction, rental, home ownership, and preservation. The total funding requested, as Vice Chair Ralph mentioned, was $8,656,000, and we have just under $6 million available. So however, 4.97 million of this total is only eligible for those projects that qualify for House Bill 1590 funding, which has specific population requirements and must support households earning up to 60% AMI. So we received 6.65 million in requests that are eligible for this amount. Projects that aren't eligible for these funds total $2 million for only 1 million available. And you'll notice on the slide that all the project requests are eligible for Substitute House Bill 1406 funds. This is to try and paint a picture for you early on about what the funding options are. And I did mention to the advisory board some limitations on staff capacity to handle multiple project contracts and requested that they limit their recommendation to no more than 3 or 4 projects. This is because it takes a lot of work, time, and resources to develop a funding contract and the many associated documents that go along with these projects. So wanted that to be a consideration as they develop their recommendation to you. So let's learn a little bit about the projects. I'll present them to you in the order shown on the slide, which is in order of funding request, largest to smallest. And also important to note with this year's changes, explicitly allowing a city the opportunity to say that they don't support a particular project in their jurisdiction. And if that was the case, the application would not move forward in the process. We did not receive any letters or notification that would indicate this from any of our members. So I know that was important to the board, so wanted to highlight that for you. So TWG Pandean at Star Lake. So the south building, building 1 of 2 of Pandean at Star Lake, is a multifamily rental mixed use project consisting of 168 affordable housing units for households earning between 30% and 60% area median income or AMI in Kent. The project is located adjacent to the Kent Star Lake Link light rail station. And this transit-oriented development project will provide a mix of studio 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. The project will include ground floor commercial space consisting of an early learning center for low-income children and other nonprofit tenants. The property was purchased by the developer in December 2022, and the project is a 7-story building with 6 stories of affordable housing over 1 story of commercial space plus basement level parking. So the project is a combined 4% and 9% low income housing tax credit or LIHTC project, meaning they're applying for both of these tax credits. Pandean at Star Lake is a partnership between TWG Development and Vision House, with Vision House providing on-site supportive services for the 4% LIHTC households, which totals 140 units. In collaboration with the City of Kent, an additional service provider will be selected to serve residents of the 9% LIHTC households that make up 28 units. The request is for $2,856,000 in the form of a deferred contingent forgivable loan, and SKIP funds are requested for new building construction. Within half a mile of the project site is an elementary school, a medical clinic, Safeway, a UPS store, a pet hospital, Great Clips, Bartell Drugs, Planet Fitness, an international grocery store, faith-based organization, other commercial amenities. So the 168 units will be comprised of 30 studios, 78 1-bedrooms, 24 2-bedrooms, and 36 3-bedrooms, serving households earning between 30% AMI and 60% AMI. This includes 109 units for the general population, 30 units for families with children, 25 units for families with children that require permanent supportive services or who are transitioning out of homelessness or are at risk of homelessness, and 4 units supporting households with an intellectual and or developmental disability or IDD requiring supportive services. So as mentioned, they purchased the property in December of 2022. Construction is anticipated to begin in December 2025. So this would mean that we wouldn't even begin contracting until 2 or more years from now. The building would be move-in ready by early 2028. So this is the first year the project sponsor has applied to funders. They applied to Amazon, Department of Commerce's Housing Trust Fund, and King County. LIHTC applications will be submitted early next year, and the total cost of development is $87.1 million. And in the lower table on the slide, you can see the uses of the funds, with construction costs alone totaling almost $400,000 per unit. And TWG has a history of development across 18 states. TWG Property Management has managed 86 properties and will provide on-site property management and maintenance 5 days a week. So I want to, I can go on to the next project, but want to know your preference. If you want to pause and ask questions, I know it's a lot of information on a project, so you know, if there are questions on a specific project, I think I would invite those at the end, at the kind of pause point. So any questions on the TWG project?
Tracy.
Thank you. So just to clarify, you said that the funds wouldn't be used, would they be used for operating and planning, or only for the capital part of the project? And if that doesn't begin for 2 years, do we have parameters around that? I can't remember. If we allocate or deliver funds like this year, is there a timeline for using it for the actual building part of their project?
So the request to skip is only for the construction.
Okay.
And in our guidelines, we do not have a requirement that funds be spent by a certain time, or that we'll hold the funds in place for a certain number of years. And so that's something that, you know, for next year we can consider. I think, you know, if that is something that's important, we can incorporate that into the guidelines.
So you're saying we don't necessarily hold. In other words, if we grant this, we give the funds to them. We just somehow need to follow up, make sure that the funds stay on hold until they begin construction.
So
is that what you're saying?
It's a little confusing. Because we actually don't just write a check. We have to we do a reimbursement style award. And so when after the cities agree that they want to fund a project, we submit an award letter to the project sponsor. So they have that in hand, so they can go and tell all the other funders, hey, you know, we got this award, and it helps them secure additional funding. But then we wouldn't actually contract with them or fund them until, in this case, construction began, and that they were expending funds that they have to pay for, and then we reimburse for those receipts that we see.
So we get to hold the funds for 3 years. I mean, and
yep,
you know, gain interest or whatever. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Tracy. Eric.
Thank you. As we're looking at these different projects, does SKIP staff have a evaluation methodology internally? For example, did we ever develop a theory of change, and do we have the ability to compare project opportunities, funding opportunities like this, you know, for how well it aligns to a theory of change? Or do we have parameters around cost per beneficiary and even beneficiary selection that we know that we're working with the right subpopulation that's more strategic for our theory of change? A lot of SKIP's startup happened before I became involved. And so I thought there might be some methodology and evaluation criteria that I'm not aware of, or that could be things that we still have an opportunity to develop as we move forward. But I would be interested to hear staff's recommendations, and also if among ourselves, as we judge these funding opportunities, if there are guiding principles that we agree would be important for suggesting which of these are best aligned to our strategy.
Yeah, so right now, the projects are evaluated based on the adopted guidelines and the criteria and funding priorities that the board adopted in the summer, and you'll continue to do that every year. We'll go over that document to make sure it's still in alignment. And so that is the tool that we use to evaluate, and it's really comprehensive, I would say. So this year we developed very specific evaluation forms for the advisory board that really list in detail every item that they need to consider that was discussed or mentioned as a considering factor. So we took it straight from the guidelines, and you know, I think for next year we can certainly, you know, look at that. And I don't know much about the theory of change, but I would be happy to look into that and see if that makes sense. So I've heard from some other interest about some other funding priorities as well, and so I think next year's conversation will be helpful in that. And so I'm taking notes, and I would ask that you take notes too, so we can
Sure, yeah.
we get to that point next year, we have that ready.
No, that sounds great. And if in principle it seems like the projects are strategically aligned and are focused on the right subpopulation of beneficiaries, that's great. Then for me, it would just stand out as important to look at the cost per beneficiary, because we want to be able to do the very most that we can with the dollars available, but then also an assessment of just the likely sustainability and feasibility of the projects. And then in addition to that, if we were to select a project that had a higher cost per beneficiary or was more exploratory, didn't have as much evidence on which we could judge the feasibility or sustainability, that project that has characteristics that don't measure up as favorably, that project might represent an exciting innovation or a model that we felt could be especially scalable were it to be proven in successfully piloting. For example, the Burien project stood out to me as one with a lower impact just in terms of the total population of people being served, but maybe it's a model that we're especially interested in, and we could see ourselves as being seed funders of an organization proving what could be an important model for the area. So these are just the things in my head as I'm looking at all of this. Cost per beneficiary stands out, or alternatively, is it something that's costlier but may be more promising at scale?
Eric, thank you for that. I think it provides us with a really good starting point for our conversation as we head into next year and what we're going to be, what we set up our criteria for the funding. Somebody can stop me if I'm wrong, but the Burien project that is on the list this year, they also applied last year. We did have concerns with maybe how far along they were in the process, their history being a very, very new organization. And so we did say to them, you know, go back and do some more work and we'll talk to you again next year. So that, that kind of conversation has been in place. I don't know that it's been as formalized maybe as some of the things that that you're suggesting, and I think that we should look at. But that kind of conversation is exactly what we did last year as we were looking at who we were going to fund.
Great, thank you, Mara.
And I will mention, or I did hear the likely feasibility of a project as a concern, and that is something that we look at. That is one of the criteria that we consider. And so on the evaluation form, we have like feasibility of the project, like low, medium, low, medium. And so that is a considering factor as well. Right.
Any other questions on the TWG project? All right, I am not seeing any hands raised, so let's move on to the next one.
All right, thank you. So Lehigh's Skyway Affordable Housing and Early Learning Center is a multifamily rental project in unincorporated King County. The project will provide 55 total units. This includes 12 studios, 19 one-bedrooms, 13 two-bedrooms, and 11 three-bedroom units for households earning between 30% and 50% AMI, with a 75% set aside, or 42 units, for households transitioning out of homelessness with on-site case management. An early learning center will be located on the ground floor of the building, featuring 4 classrooms to accommodate up to 80 children, a parent resource room, and offices. Additional amenities include a community room, case manager offices, and a roof deck for residential use. So the request is for $2.8 million in the form of a deferred contingent forgivable loan. SKHHP funds are requested for new building construction. And the racially diverse neighborhood of Skyway has a population that is majority BIPOC, with the highest population of Black residents in King County. That's 26% as of the 2020 census. The project is located along a King County metro route, which provides transportation to downtown Seattle. Within a half-mile of the project is an elementary school, middle school, library, and the soon-to-open Skyway Community Center. The project will provide 25 units for individuals exiting homelessness and 17 units for families exiting homelessness, earning up to 30% AMI, for a total set aside of 42 units for this population. The remaining 12 units will support general population households earning up to 50% AMI. A common room will support all residents, which is included as 1 unit in the total number provided by the project. And Lehigh will provide 1.5 case managers on site that will help in stabilizing residents into permanent supportive housing. And the project will prioritize residents with a connection to the neighborhood. So Lehigh purchased the site in January of this year, and construction is anticipated to begin in June 2025 and is anticipated to be move-in ready by mid-October 2026.
Claire, can I jump in really quick and have you pop back one slide? You said can you remind me of the percentage of the 30% and below, and then they've only got 1.5 case managers for the entire project?
That's correct.
So
Yes.
maybe to my human services friends, does that seem really low to you all? Because it stood out to me.
How many units again?
42.
55.
Well,
Oh,
50,
32 and below, and then another, yeah, so a total of 55.
but 42 would need the case manager services.
Yeah, that's about right. We see that ratio with Lehigh in tiny house villages. We see that in other projects that they do, that's 1.5 is actually, it's typically 1 to 40. But the 1.5 is great. They are pretty experienced at doing that work. So is it 24/7?
I need to double check that.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, sorry for the interruption.
Thank you. Thank you, Colleen. All right. So Lehigh has received strong funding commitments from the state legislature, a direct appropriation from the federal government, a foundation, and from King County, including a $2.5 million pre-development fund award last year. And they were planning to apply to the Department of Commerce's Housing Trust Fund this year, but they'll postpone that application until next year. they had a lot of other competing projects this year, and so decided to postpone that one. The total cost of development is approximately 36.3 million. And in the lower table on the slide, you can see the uses of the funds, with construction costs alone totaling almost $500,000 per unit. And through a third-party construction cost estimate report that we collaborated with King County on, this construction estimate is sound. And Lehigh has a history of development and property management in Washington State. And Lehigh manages and maintains their own properties, as you're likely familiar with, and they will use their model internal management plan that's used at their other projects, which includes a description of the long-term maintenance plan of the property, building security and emergency plans, and tenant screening and selection process, among other items. So that is the Lehigh Skyway project. Any questions on that one?
Not seeing any hands raised.
All right, let's keep going. All right, so Mercy Housing Northwest Kent Multicultural Village is a 199 unit multifamily rental project in Kent, adjacent to the future Kent Des Moines Link light rail station opening in 2026. The project will support households earning 30% AMI to 80% AMI, with a 20% set aside, or 39 units, for households with an IDD with on-site supportive services. The project includes studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedroom units. The site is comprised of 8 stories and will include a community center, a family resource center, and a licensed early learning facility, with 6 classrooms to accommodate 96 infants and children, with a focus on serving children with an IDD. The project is a partnership between Mercy Housing Northwest and Open Doors for Multicultural Families, who will provide support to the IDD households and will relocate their headquarters to the property. Open Doors for Multicultural Families is a nonprofit organization dedicated to meeting the needs of persons of color living with IDD, especially immigrants and refugees. The project will be located on surplus land from Sound Transit and is a transit-oriented development project. And the project will provide underground parking and has added additional accessible van parking. So the request to skip is for $1 million in the form of a deferred contingent forgivable loan, and skip funds are requested for new building construction. Within half mile of the project are 2 medical clinics, Highline Community College, a Walgreens, a Lowe's, a Dollar Tree, and a grocery store. Of the 199 units, which will serve 30% AMI to 80% AMI households, a 39 unit set aside will be reserved for households with an IDD and 61 units for families with children. Over 90% of the units will be affordable to households earning below 60% AMI, and 20% of the units will be affordable to households earning below 30% AMI. So the project sponsor was awarded the RFP by Sound Transit for the site, but the terms of development still need to be worked out. Sound Transit has conditionally accepted the project for the site, and the developer hopes to close on negotiations to gain site control by March 2024, excuse me. Construction is anticipated to begin in June 2025 and to be move-in ready by June 2027. So King County conditionally committed $5 million for the Sound Transit RFP in 2022 in a show of strong commitment for the project. Once Sound Transit finalizes the negotiation, King County will release those funds. This slide should say committed rather than received for that line item under King County. And this year they applied to the Department of Commerce Housing Trust Fund and for Amazon grants and loans. And as a LIHTC project, they will apply early next year and will also be pursuing funding next year for non-residential components of the project. So the total cost of development is approximately $134.3 million. In the lower table on the slide, you can see the uses of the funds, with construction costs alone totaling almost $500,000 per unit. And I have ordered a third-party construction cost estimate for this project, and we'll have the results of that report to share with the advisory board by their November 2nd meeting. And that's it on Mercy Housing Project.
Right. Any questions on this project? Eric.
I don't want to over talk. And so first I want to make sure I'm not over talking because maybe there will be a chance for us to all reflect on this. Maybe I can take notes. But Claire and Mayor Ruff, would you like to hear comments as we go, or should we save them till the end?
No, I think we, as we do each project, is probably the best time to have that conversation.
Yeah, I just had a question, I guess, for the group. A per unit cost of $674,000 is considerable expense. And were we to try to scale this approach countywide, I wonder if it would be feasible or sustainable. But I did like that the project acknowledged a lot of the different dimensions of vulnerability, where on the one hand, housing is important, but housing on its own is less useful if there aren't solutions for vulnerable children in the household, transport and transit solutions, proximity to grocery, proximity to healthcare, that all of these things are important for household resilience and sustainability. I like that acknowledgement and how it was pitched and how it's designed, but wow, the cost is really considerable. And is it really a demonstration of a way forward on this issue? I'm not sure at this price point that it could be proven to be so.
Yeah, I think all very good conversation points. Tracy.
So taking along with that, I'm guessing from the map that we were shown that there's a lot of public spaces involved in this, going back right there. So you've got a plaza and a community center. I'm guessing all of everything that's involved in those areas is included in the per unit price. If that's true, and then I have another comment either way.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
And if it's helpful, I mean, we can do the math on separating residential and non-residential, but I thought it was more helpful to see the total cost of the entire development, given that, you know, they kind of go together, the community center and the residential. And so that was just a call on our part.
Well, I think that the consideration that needs to be taken into consideration when we're talking about cost per unit versus a building that is just units and standard landscaping. And so this is another comment question along those lines. Would that plaza and community center be available to the public? I know we've had a couple of developments in the city of Des Moines where there's a development agreement that says when the project is done, X amount of space is available to the public at like a public park or a public trail, or and for example, is this community center only going to be private, or will it be available to the community for community use, or is the project actually going to create revenue with it that will help support the services at the project? So those are all kind of questions when we're trying to weigh, or when our advisory board is trying to weigh cost per unit. There's some other public amenities possibly here.
So Claire, I can jump in a little bit. This drawing that you are seeing is very not completely, it's not set in stone. As the city that the project is located in, we have a significant amount of support for open doors and for this concept. But in all transparency, we've got concerns about the layout on the property. We've got concerns about that community center facing out to what is going to be the main entrance into that light rail station. and the feasibility of the community center. It was kind of a late addition because part of the RFP for the Sound Transit property was that there be 2 separate buildings. So we're still pretty deep in conversation with Mercy Housing and Open Doors on what this will actually end up being. So I don't want anybody to feel like if this doesn't get built, that it wasn't, that we funded something that we didn't know we were funding. So and so then that only really kind of complicates your questions or points, Tracy, about like the plaza. There's a lot of concerns on design still. This is still very, very, very high level. And we're trying to work with Mercy Housing and Open Doors and Sound Transit to help them build a project that makes sense for the population that they're trying to serve. Again, super supportive of that, but also makes sense in the context of being at the light rail, public access, because to your point, right, the whole idea of transit-oriented development is not only that the people that live there have access, but that the community at large has access to areas. So more to come on so not questioning the population that's going to be served, but I wouldn't be comfortable in saying this is what it's going to look like, because I don't think this is what it's going to look like. So, Sonari.
Yeah, thank you. And sorry, just with the cold, I'm not jumping on video today, but I think I'd echo what Tracy said about separating out community facility costs from and not calling it part of cost per unit. I also think, you know, in the conversation, I was remarking to Michaela on the side that Eric, you were saying cost per beneficiary in the beginning, and then I know we have the data on cost per unit. One of the challenges with talking about cost per unit is it kind of masks the benefit of larger units that are included in a development. And I know we all have a problem of finding spaces for families to live within our communities. And so I think that's another kind of layer to add on as we're thinking about what are the costs, perceived costs of a building is if it's, you know, a bunch of 3-bedroom units that you're able to create, that's obviously going to have a higher cost than a bunch of studios and 1-bedrooms, but there would be a different kind of benefit given some of the challenges we see in our communities. So just applying a little nuance there. And then, yeah, I would remove any community facility or office or commercial costs. You can call it as part of the overall total development cost, but I wouldn't call it part of the per unit cost. But it is something I think to Mayor Rell's point that to think about in the concept of like, what's the feasibility of the overall project? How long will it take them to pull together the financing for any community and office components? Because that can be trickier sometimes than the housing financing.
All right, any other questions or comments on this project? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. Claire, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. All right, EcoThrive. Right, so the next project will maybe look familiar to you all, as alluded to earlier, because they applied last year. So the Burien Cooperative Village is a 27-unit cottage homeownership project in Burien. The cottages will include 3 studios, 11 1-bedrooms, and 13 2-bedroom units, ranging in size from 320 square feet to 650 square feet, including 2 ADA accessible units. The cottages will be affordable to purchase for households earning an average of 50% AMI, not to exceed 60% AMI. And ownership will be through a limited equity cooperative, or LEC. And an LEC is a home ownership model in which residents purchase a share in a development rather than an individual unit and commit to resell their share at a price determined by formula in order to maintain affordability over the long term. The project is designed to be climate adaptive with water catchment, organic gardens, and energy efficient buildings with renewable energy capacity. So the project will include 12 duplex units, 3 standalone units, a common building, a playground, and on-site landscaping of native and edible plants. The project was accepted into the City of Burien's Affordable Housing Demonstration Program by the Burien City Council on March 27th, 2023. The land was purchased in 2023 by EcoThrive using funds from the Land Acquisition Program administered by the Washington State Housing Finance Commission. And the request to skip is for $1 million in the form of a grant to support the construction of new buildings and to cover permit and development fees. The project is near 2 major transit stops that connect to local and regional transit hubs, including the Tukwila International Boulevard Link Light Rail Station. An elementary school and park are within 5-minute walking distance, and a library and commercial sites and restaurants are located within a 15-minute walking distance. No specific population is served except for households earning up to 60% AMI, who also income qualify and can afford to make ongoing mortgage payments. As mentioned earlier, EcoThrive received a loan from the Washington State Housing Finance Commission to purchase the land, which EcoThrive did in February of this year. If they are successful with their funding requests for this year, they anticipate to begin construction in April of 2024 and to be move-in ready by July 2025. So EcoThrive has currently applied for multiple funding sources, but not to the regular major funders like King County or the State Housing Trust Fund. They said that they are anticipating a federal direct appropriation once the federal budget is adopted, and nobody really knows when that will happen. The total project development cost is approximately $7 million, and they estimate total cost per unit to be $259,000. And I've ordered a third-party construction cost estimate for this project, and we'll have the results of that report to share with the advisory board by their November 2nd meeting. And this would be EcoThrive's first development project. And the lead developer for the project has 30 years of conventional real estate development experience in the Pacific Northwest. That's EcoThrive's project.
Any questions on this project? Tracy.
It's what's the FHLB Des Moines grant? I'm not familiar with that, or that's not us, right? Is that something else?
It's not you. It's not.
I didn't. Yeah. More just a comment. I'm kind of excited about this idea, these community land trusts, that because it invites home ownership, which invites stability and investment into the community. People stay longer. They invest. Their families are more rooted in the community, and I think I haven't heard as much about them. I think it's a relatively new idea moving forward strongly, and I know there are probably going to be pros and cons as we move forward, things that we didn't expect. But I'm excited to see how some of these communities unfold in the larger region, and just to be able to include home ownership as part of our affordable housing model. I'm just excited about these ideas, and it would be really great to participate in something like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. On the homeownership front, I will second that. I am more than frustrated that our whole conversation seems to focus around rental when it comes to housing stability, as opposed to providing that ownership opportunity where people are able to establish that generational wealth and roots and ties in the community. I feel like we're shortchanging a lot of folks in not providing that opportunity. My mortgage has not gone up since I got it, except for my property taxes, but rent has gone up 300%. So allowing people to get into that, what I think should be considered far more stable housing, is something I'd really like to see us be able to do more of. So, any other questions on the Burien project? Okay, I don't see any hands. Claire, back to you.
All right, thank you. All right, so Victorian Place 2 is a multifamily preservation 20-unit rental project in Des Moines. Since 1996, the nonprofit Multi-Service Center, or MSC, has owned the 2 adjacent buildings that comprise the project, which includes 5 units for households earning up to 30% AMI, 10 units for households up to 40% AMI, and 5 units for households up to 50% AMI. The 23-bedroom, 2-bath affordable rental units are in active use. So the request is for $500,000 in the form of a grant, and SKIP funds are requested to support the rehabilitation of the 2 buildings, including landscape improvements, staircase repairs, installation of new railings, seal coating the parking lot, upgrading external lighting, recoating tenant decks, installation of new siding, replacing gutters and downspouts, replacing windows, replacing sliding glass doors, replacing unit entry doors, and replacing baseboard heating with energy efficient heating systems. Pacific Highway is within walking distance and features multiple transit connections, including the King County Rapid Line. And within 1/2 mile of the project is the Highline Community College and a park. The Kent Des Moines Link Light Rail Station, scheduled to open in 2026, is just over a mile away. The project supports families with children and households earning between 30% AMI and 50% AMI, and these units are reserved exclusively for families upon move-in. So the Multi-Service Center has owned the site since 2000, and they anticipate beginning construction in mid to late 2024, depending on weather and rehabilitation, to conclude 1 year after beginning. So SKIP is the only funder MSC applied to for this renovation project, which totals approximately $508,000. The per unit cost for the rehabilitation would be about $25,000 per unit, and an updated cost estimate has been requested. When Multi-Service Center originally acquired the property, they received funds from the State Housing Trust Fund and King County for acquisition and rehabilitation. The existing rent restriction covenant is in place through 2049, and a SKIP covenant would provide affordability for 50 years. MSC applied to the State Housing Trust Fund in 2021, but they weren't successful in getting that funding due to a high volume of competing applications. That year, though, MSC submitted 5 applications to them, and 2 were successfully funded by Department of Commerce at that time. And the sponsor reported that it's difficult to be awarded funding for rehabilitation projects such as this from other larger public funders, since the focus for many public funders is on creating new units of affordable housing, and larger preservation projects are often more competitive than smaller preservation projects when competing for the same funds. That said, other renovation projects of the sponsor have been funded by Pierce County and the City of Federal Way's Community Development Block Grant funds. And MSC has a history of providing affordable housing in Washington, and Allied Residential provides the day-to-day on-site management and support for residents, and has been in operation since 1987. And that's Victorian Place 2.
Hey, Colleen.
Thank you, co-chair or vice chair. I was curious, what happens to, since it's fully leased currently, what happens to those residents? Do they move out, then move back in? Does it go out for lease again? Did they talk at all about that?
Yeah, I asked them if there was going to need to be some kind of temporary, relocation, and they thought that the renovations could be completed while folks were still living there, since it sounds like with a lot of it's going to be exterior, but then like deck renovation and switching out doors, that can be done during the day fairly quickly, it sounds like. So they didn't think that anyone would need to be relocated.
Any other questions?
Sorry, I lost my reactions button. I found it again. Okay. Yeah, I just want to validate some of what they said about rehab costs and preservation costs not being terribly competitive in other funding rounds. It's a struggle we've acknowledged for a while at the county, but we haven't come up with a solution to yet, that it's difficult for us with the pressure for new capital and the way our funding sources are structured to prioritize preservation. So I do think this is a really interesting opportunity. It's also one that would require a different kind of due diligence than the other applications, because I think rehab, we just want to make sure we know that whatever their proposal is, we'll set them up for a longer term of keeping the building running. And that's different than, kind of looking at overall, what's their construction plan for a new construction.
I'm excited about the preservation opportunity. Is something we all have talked about a lot, that South County has a solid amount of stock when it comes to affordable housing. We just aren't seeing the opportunities to preserve that housing and making sure that it's a place that people should be living. So I'm very grateful for these kind of opportunities. And MSC has worked in a lot of our communities for a long time and does great things. So I'm a fan. All right. Any other questions on this project? Okay, next one.
Right. So we have a second project application from MSC. The White River Apartments is a multifamily preservation 24-unit rental project in Auburn. The building was constructed in 1978 and MSC took over ownership in 2000. The project consists of 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom units in active use, which includes 3 units serving households earning up to 30% AMI, 16 units at 45% AMI, and 5 units at 80% AMI. And the 80% AMI units are currently occupied by households earning less than 60% AMI, and those units would shift to income restricted up to 60% AMI if these funds are awarded. So the request is for $500,000 in the form of a grant. SKIP funds are requested to support the rehabilitation of the 24 units, including installation of new washers and dryers, modernization of plumbing systems, replacement of shower surrounds, siding replacement, refurbishment of cabinetry, replacement of entry doors, incorporation of screen doors, replacement of gutters and downspouts, renewal of walkway railings, and refinishing of the parking lot through seal coating. A King County Metro route is located within walking distance and connects to the Auburn Transit Center and Sounder commuter rail station. Within a half mile of the project is an elementary school and game farm park. Of the 2 applications submitted this year by MSC, they indicated that Victorian Place 2 is the higher of the 2 priorities, since the larger units are more difficult for families in need to access, and the current safety concerns at Victoria Place are more immediate. So the Multi-Service Center has owned the site since 1996. They anticipate beginning construction in mid to late 2024, depending on weather, and rehabilitation to conclude 1 year after beginning. So similar to the last project we reviewed, submitted by MSC, SKIP is the only funder they applied to for this renovation project, which totals approximately $507,000. The per unit cost for the rehabilitation would be about $21,000. And when MSC originally acquired the property, they received funds from the State Housing Trust Fund and King County for acquisition and rehabilitation. And the existing rent restriction covenant is in place through 2051. A SKIP covenant would provide, just a reminder, that affordability for 50 years. And an updated cost estimate was requested, since cost estimates they submitted are from 2021. And that's White River.
Any questions on this project? Hannah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just one question. They indicated that they have a priority between the 2 projects. Did they indicate that they would have the capacity to be able to do both of them on what appears to be the same timeline?
That's an interesting question. I did not ask. It sounds like they do have staff capacity. But I will ask the question to them.
Tracy.
Can help me out to clarify, will any of these new construction projects or are either of the multi-service projects, are they tax exempt or tax subsidized when they're done? I don't know if that would make any difference, but just recognizing the projects, what kind of a tax burden or expense burden these projects will have or do have.
So the first 3 projects we went over will get the low income housing tax credit from federal government. And the remaining are, so the MSC projects are, I mean, they're a 501c3 owned and operated. So whatever tax obligations apply in that case. I don't know that others might know that better in terms of property tax exemptions for them. And then EcoThrive, I'm not sure because that model is so new and unique. I would think that because they will be owned by, the LEC, folks are purchasing into that. I would have to ask that question. I would assume that they would be obligated to be paying regular property tax, but I will ask the question.
Good, thank you. It might just be a consideration at some point while we're deciding, or how the advisory board is deciding how we are being helpful and what people's cost burden is when they're putting these together or long term. Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions on this project? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised. Claire, I've lost count. How many more do we have?
We're doing good. We have gone through them all. So we're here to talk about next steps.
All right, let's talk about next steps.
All right. So you all asked some really good questions. I'm going to take those. I'm going to ask our project sponsors, and then I'll send the board a follow-up email with those answers, and I'll share that information out with the advisory board as well. And then the advisory board will meet on November 2nd to deliberate and talk about the funding recommendation for you. And then hopefully I'll be able to transmit that in time for our November 17th meeting, where you'll consider their recommendation and adopt a final recommendation.
All right, Colleen.
Mayor Ralph, I was just curious, since there's 2 projects in Kent, did the city prioritize one over the other?
We have not prioritized them. We have had conversations with both of those projects, but we've not come up with that. We'd rather see one have funding over the other.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question though. I think they both serve distinct populations, and so that's and they sort of bookend our light rail. So pros and cons to both of the projects. All right, any other questions on the projects, the timeline, sort of what to expect next? Okay, I am not seeing any hands raised, so then we will go ahead. Claire, we'll all be watching out for the information that comes out of the advisory board, so that at our November meeting we can have a robust conversation on this and hopefully spend some money. So, all right, we will move on in the agenda. Next item is adjusted revenue available for the 2023 Housing Capital Fund. And I'm going to turn it back over to Claire to give us an update on that front.
Thank you. I'm going to try and share my screen. do some finagling. Are you able to see this memo? Probably
Yes.
not.
Yes.
It's there. Let's see. Do a little bigger.
There you go.
Thank you. All right, so in your agenda packet, you should have a memo that looks like this regarding the adjusted revenue available for our current 2023 Housing Capital Fund. And in summary, there was a miscommunication between SKIP and a member jurisdiction on the amount of substitute House Bill 1406 revenues that would be contributed to the 2023 Housing Capital Fund funding round. But the error wasn't identified by either party until several months after the funding guidelines were adopted and posted publicly. So we anticipated having $1,060,000 available in substitute House Bill 1406 funds, but with the correction, we actually only have $928,812 available. So my primary concern is that applicants submitted their project proposals with just over $1 million available in mind. And the concern is that having less available may break trust with current and future applicants. So upon inquiring with the jurisdiction staff about potential options available, one possible solution was identified, though I will caveat this strongly, that option one that you're seeing on your screen would be pending final approval from the jurisdiction's finance director. And that said, I wanted to gauge the board's interest in pursuing an option other than taking no action. So option one would advance the jurisdiction's substitute House Bill 1406 that would be contributed next year to the current funding round in an attempt to get closer to $1 million. And there's no guarantee that the city would actually collect the difference, but very preliminary estimates suggest that it's a strong possibility. We wouldn't know more until the end of the year. And if the jurisdiction advanced these funds to SKIP this year, it would mean that we would have that amount less in next year's funding round. So the other option is to do nothing and make the $928,000 available and explain to the advisory board and to those projects that receive funding recommendations the issue this year. So with that, I would love to hear your feedback on which option you prefer. And thank you, and happy to take any questions you may have.
Okay. Tracy.
So in regard to the funding availability, so a couple of these projects, we saw that the actual funding isn't going to be dispersed, could possibly up to a couple of years. So whatever we technically award is a promise anyway. And so I'm wondering if we can say, even if we don't have, in other words, it's an award based on projections, and then we just adjust next year how much money we have available for next year's round of funding based on the fact that we awarded. It's almost like a pre-award. Is that against the rules to do that? I mean, I would say no action taken, just readjust next year's availability.
So from an accounting perspective, it feels a little challenging because I guess then it also feels like a slippery slope. Like, can't we project out our funding that we might get available and fund all the projects this year, right, in terms of advancing those funds? So I don't know if there's anything in our in our bylaws or our ILAs that would prevent that. I just think accounting wise, it might be a little challenging. But also I suppose it depends on the funding jurisdiction that this is applying to as well, to see their their preference on things. But
Or we could call it lesson learned and put specific language in our funding guidelines next year that we're not allowed to project or to borrow from this year for the future, and then just do it this one time. You know, I'm trying to make things easier. This could be making it harder. So just it was an accidental oversight. But the other thing is, transparency is always a really good thing. And one thing I've learned as an elected, if you just tell people the truth, oh, hey, dang, I made a mistake, and here's a way we can fix it, it actually kind of builds trust. And so I'm not as nervous about just being upfront and honest with some of our requesters either. I think honesty builds trust. So
I 100% agree with that statement, Tracy, but I feel like just being honest about where we're at, I'm hesitant. And then going forward, an approximation, this is approximately what we'll have available. This 131,000 is not going to make or break, but I think it does help build trust in us being honest. Eric.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not sure which jurisdiction it is, and I hate to speak about another city's business, but I would support the option 2. Just because I think the applicants are able to draw on multiple funding sources. They're not viewing SKIP as a sole source of funds, and certainly they'll understand if we explain transparently what happened. I don't think they'll hold it against us.
Sonari just put in the chat that she said she thinks they usually say up to an amount will be available. So I feel like that might be, if we're not doing that already, that might be something important going forward. Any other thoughts? I'm hearing sort of a leaning towards the just let's say this is what happened and sort of move forward option. Anybody else with thoughts or concerns?
Given where we heard some of the projects were in their pre-development phase, I think if we reserve the funds for next year, then we can encourage them to apply to that funding cycle.
All right. Any other comments? Claire, do you have, I feel like it's reasonably clear sort of where the group is leaning. You comfortable with that?
yes, there's a few folks if others are willing to to chime in, that would be helpful. I've got four for option 2.
Yeah, I'm sort of willing to go with the group on this one. I think the City of Seattle did do the pre-commitment thing that Tracy mentioned once, but I feel like they did it more for a specific programmatic reason to take advantage of lower costs at that moment of time and try to make a big splash about the number of projects they were funding, not for something that's more of like a clerical issue. And so it does sound more complex than this warrants. And I think I agree with Mayor Ralph on just the being transparent and with Hannah on the like folks can come back again for other pieces of funding.
And it looks like we've had a couple more folks weigh in with option 2. I feel like that probably gets us to critical mass there.
Yeah, option 2 from Berrien as well. I did have a quick question though, just maybe a learning experience here. Does the city that went ahead and paid the invoice, do they not have like a set account for their 1406 funds to roll into? Or like, if there's something to be learned for our own finance departments, it'd be helpful to know. And we can talk offline if you want to. So
we could talk offline, but no, so they didn't actually pay the invoice. I mean, that was part of our miscommunication, and it was kind of, you know, waiting to be identified. And then when they saw it, like, oh no, this is this is a lot more than yes, we're setting up some, I would say, better communication systems too, and just double checking with staff to make sure that we're getting the information we need, so we can make sure to invoice all jurisdictions the correct amount. And so, yeah, I think that I hope that this is a one-time thing and that this doesn't happen to anyone else here.
Right. We continue to learn and grow. That's circling all the way back to the beginning of this conversation. We're new at this and making really, really good progress. And Tracy, like I said, I just want to second that I have found over and over again that whether it be our constituents or business owners, residents, developers, they would much rather hear us say, you know what, we didn't do that right, but we're going to figure it out and do it right the next time, than trying to dance around the topic. So I think that applies across the board. So. All right, we are going to move on to legislative priorities. So we've been talking about this kind of on and off for a while. We had a legislative agenda, pretty robust legislative agenda last year. As we got into session, it became very apparent that it would be nearly impossible to get all of our cities on the same page on the number of housing related bills last session, as far as Skip taking a position on the things that we saw come through. Like I said, because we're all very different cities, even though we have a lot in common, and the sheer number and the amount of times they changed last year. So collectively in our conversations, we've kind of come up with this idea of a one-pager that really talks about who we are as Skip, sort of what our primary goals are, and then being supportive in general of additional funding for affordable housing. So we've got a one-pager put together that we can take a look at. And Claire, I'll turn it over to Claire to put that up on the screen, but then also just wanted to, after we do that, maybe a little bit of follow-up conversation on 1110, some of those impacts. And just wanted to share some of the things I heard from the AWC legislators tour, and how surprised they were that most of the things we were all saying about affordable housing in South County, and how it could be impacted. So we can wrap up with that. So Claire, I will turn it over to you to put the flyer up. We can walk through it together, and anybody as we're going through, please feel free to jump in and we'll work through this together.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So as mentioned, the board was supportive of focusing on one legislative priority this year, funding all aspects of affordable housing in South King County. And to help amplify that message, we developed a one-pager that electeds and administrators can use in your meetings with state and federal delegations. So we took your feedback on the flyer back in August. And worked with our design contact to come up with the design that you're seeing before you. And as a reminder of that feedback, you wanted the legislative priority to be really highlighted front and center. Most members were fine with the amount of text. So we didn't actually change any of the text itself. Also to note, we do have a broken link in the flyer. It's number 4 and 5. So those got moved on this website. And so I need to go and track that one down, make sure we have the correct link. So after hearing your thoughts and feedback, we'll make any changes. But if this flyer with some of those changes are satisfactory to the board, I'll share it as a PDF along with some suggested talking points that you can use in those meetings with the delegations sometime in the next couple weeks. So with that, happy to hear any thoughts.
Claire, I know that Brian from Federal Way sent an email in, and you had a couple of responses. Can you walk through what Brian's concerns were and your responses to them for the group?
Yeah, let me see. Let me see if I can pull up my email.
Sorry.
No. Let me try and view it on my phone. Oh, did I hear Brian? No, he's not here. Okay. One sec. Let me pull this up here. Yeah, so Brian did say, and thank you for that reminder. So he said, okay, this is what Brian Davis wrote from City of Federal Way. Federal Way's 20-year housing needs are 2-to-1 in favor of market rate housing. If other cities are similar, I struggle with the statement that South King County is in a growing affordable housing crisis. Additionally, based on discussions we've had as a SKIP board about the previous legislative session, I don't believe funding all aspects of affordable housing is what we're looking for. The bullet points are good, but I would reframe the background statements. And my response to Brian was, I want to talk more and hope that he can mention these at this meeting. And that just a reminder that this is the third time that we've brought this forward to the board for feedback and comment. And I'm not sure if maybe he missed a meeting or two, but wanted to just make him aware of that. And he also says that under the Our Community section, the statement in the first bullet point is linked to a document that gives the same statement without data that he could see. He's doing a quick glance. He's traveling, so but there is some, I would say, qualitative explanation in that link, in that PSRC report, that it's referenced. And he says the study in the linked document appeared to cover King County as a whole without separating South King County, other than to say that we're below average in rent. And the second bullet point isn't referenced. The second bullet point is about SKIP member cities are under intense pressure to support their residents' ability to remain in the community. And the reference to the last two bullet points don't work. So he pointed that out to me. I'm very grateful for that. And so my response was, I'll update the link, and that just generally these data points for South King County in general are really hard to come by. And so if it seems like we're grasping, it's because no one is really collecting data specific to South King County. And we're a little limited in what the census even offers us. And so we did a fairly detailed kind of look and research on, you know, where South King County was referenced in these in these formal public facing documents that we could use, that we could confidently cite. And so for your awareness, because this is a limitation that we've identified in that HUD Pro Housing Grant that we are applying with Arch and King County on, if we're successful, those funds would also support a data analyst for the county, for us, for Arch to use. And my hope is that if we're successful in that grant, they can help us with some of this, getting some data that's specific to South King County to help us tell our story in a more compelling way. And so, and then I also mentioned that the second bullet doesn't have a reference because it's observational or a qualitative data point that you know, I've heard you all talk about, and I've seen as well. And so just wanted to share that information as well. So thank you, Vice Chair. And I'll go ahead and share the screen again.
Thank you, Claire. Yeah, I would just kind of chime in. I'm not inclined to go back and recraft this one more time, but I think Brian's points are pretty solid. There was an article in the Seattle Times maybe 2 weeks ago that was a graph of cities across King County and the category of housing need. And all you have to do is take one look at that, and you see that cities in South County have significantly more stock sort of in that range. And depending on who you talk to, it's the 30 to 80, the 50 to 120, like that's where our housing stock lives. And it's 30 and below that I think it's fair to say we're all struggling with. And then that 80% and above that we all do not have. So I think that's kind of what Brian was hitting on, that I mean, I can tell you that across the light rail project up on West Hill, I don't think we're going to have any market rate housing. And while I'm fully supportive of affordable housing, I need, as a city, I need market rate housing to support everything else that I need to do. And so it is frustrating. And I know, like I said, Federal Way is saying that same thing. And so really that's where I think he's driving at. I'm not personally inclined to go back and try and redo this again, but I do think it's an important talking point for all of us in looking at, you know, what exists today. And that's also why preservation is so important for South County. So other thoughts, questions, or concerns on this one pager? Patience.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I would underscore that it's important to acknowledge the reality, though, of the growing affordable housing crisis, particularly looking at South King County, where we have seen relatively higher rent increases over the past years, as much as there has been a stock of affordable housing historically. We're fast losing affordability. And we have a lot more folks who have moved to South King County who now have to move further into other parts of the county. And I think sometimes there's a gravitational pull towards debating what the right number is or what the right frame is, but really the challenge is in front of all of us. The need is greater than it's ever been, and we need to scale our investments and tools in effectively addressing the challenge.
Thank you. Tracy.
Well, first of all, my compliments. I think that, you know, this gives a bunch of information about SKIP, and you just highlighted that legislative priority there. Your eye is drawn immediately to that top corner, and I just thought you did a great job taking the recommendations. And so I thought possibly you might want to just call it the legislative priority instead of priorities, and that would draw somebody to go, oh, there's only one, what is it? And also, if you wanted to take Brian's recommendation, you could also say, well, what is the priority? Fund all aspects of affordable housing, including, and just put that in bold. And if you wanted to take the word all aspects out, you could. But this is beautiful, really. I think those were just recommendations for simplifying, getting a little bit more to the point. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. Other comments, questions? Thumbs up, thumbs down? I saw some nodding heads about being in a good place earlier. So, okay, there I'm seeing some, there we go. Nice. Anybody have any like strong, this is not going to work sense? All right, all the thumbs up are fading off into the sunset. So I think that puts us in a pretty solid place, Claire, for where we're at. I would agree with Tracy's comment just on the priority versus priorities. It does send a stronger message that we're just asking for that one specific, collectively, that one specific thing. So, to wrap this section up before we go into announcements, just want to highlight there was an AWC legislative tour. Senator Leas is working on the TOD bill for next session. We had a lot of conversation around it last session and sort of the impacts. And the takeaway that I received from Kristen, our long range planner, was just the lack of understanding, and I'm saying this in the most respectful way, of our legislators about what's actually in existence in South King County when it comes to housing, affordability, and the impacts that we're going to see from like 1110. I think we all collectively we're very concerned, continue to be concerned that what it will do is actually eliminate affordable housing in South County as opposed to adding it in when you start looking at relatively less expensive properties that can be torn down and new stock being built. So I know we talked a little bit about this. I just wanted to really share the opportunity and my frustration with the education. It is going to be, going into next session, more imperative, more important for us than ever to share South King County's story and the impacts of how this legislation plays out very differently in Burien and Des Moines, Federal Way, Renton, than it does in, say, Bellevue or Kirkland. So that's really all I had to add on that. Claire, did you have anything else that you were looking for, or does anybody else have anything to weigh in on that point?
No, I think that, the reason I put this on the agenda, just as a reminder, and maybe folks, just to refresh memories, the last meeting, it had kind of come up as a topic, like a spontaneous topic. And so the goal was to really put this on the agenda to make space and time for it, to just make sure folks can have that opportunity to talk to each other about that. So that's, just wanted to add in that.
Anything else on that front? Right, not seeing any hands raised. That will bring us down to our last item. Claire has some updates and announcements to share, and then we'll do a round the screen. Anybody have anything for the good of the order? And that'll be it.
Thank you. Yeah, we are making great time. In the agenda packet email I sent you all last Friday, it also contained a request for your consideration to include the SKIP legislative priority in your jurisdiction's legislative agenda for the upcoming session, and in your federal legislative agenda, if that's applicable to your jurisdiction. This will help amplify the common concern and need for additional resources for affordable housing in South King County. And a few members have already taken action to incorporate the SKIP legislative priority into their respective legislative agenda. So thank you. So in the Friday agenda packet email, there is suggested language that you can use. Feel free to modify it. But this is something we had talked about back in August as being another way for us to amplify our voice and to be unified on this. So take a look at that, and if you're able to do that, wonderful. And then CTAC. So I have presented twice now to the city of SeaTac at their invitation to explore what SKIP membership is all about. They will be taking action November 28th considering joining SKIP and adopting a funding allocation for next year's Housing Capital Fund. So we talked about this as a board before this a few months back, I would say. I didn't hear any reservations from any board members with CTAC joining SKIP. So if the timeline stays on track, the board would adopt a resolution accepting their adoption of the ILA and welcoming them as the newest member as our first item of business, likely in January. So wanted to share that out with the board. Just so excited about that. And regarding the HUD program, so the HUD Pathways to Reducing Obstacles to Affordable Housing grant was publicly posted, and the email was sent on October 11th at 1:40 p.m. from me with the link to that application. We have received lots of letters of support, so thank you to everyone that's been working hard on that. It really will make our application stronger. So if you haven't submitted a letter yet, the deadline is October 26th at noon. And thank you to everyone that has submitted those. I think we have 6, 7 maybe. So very excited about that. And then I'll be reaching out to each of you to schedule some one-on-one end of year check-ins that I'd like to just connect with each board member on. So please be on the lookout for those. And then lastly, I'm just curious about if the board is still interested in learning more about tax increment financing or TIFs. If so, there's a possibility of us bringing in hiring someone to present on this topic. And I wanted to gauge the interest of the board before researching any further. So it would likely be like a paid consultant, but they may also do it for free for us. So, but it would be a more lengthy, probably an hour long, I would say, briefing. So just curious if folks are interested in that, if that's something I should pursue. We had talked about it a little bit before, but wanted to just circle back with the board.
Tracy.
I am very interested. And I guess if we do decide to do this, would we be able to invite some of our colleagues to join along, maybe not as a panelist, but just as in listening? I know if we did that, I would pitch it hard to my colleagues to attend. And that would work. I have really been a strong voice. Our city manager worked on a tax increment financing project about a decade ago down in Florida, and I've been very interested. So just, would that be possible? We could, not just for us, but I mean, would we be able to invite some of our colleagues to come and listen in? We did that.
Well, it's a public meeting, so.
Okay.
I don't see why.
Thank you. 2 thumbs up.
A really powerful tool, but also extremely complicated. So I would also be supportive of any sort of presentation. We saw a comment from patients about Pacifica Law Group being possibly a good resource there. So let's do this. Is there anyone that would be opposed to a presentation on TIF? All right. That's 100%. Everybody is supportive. See how we did that? It's faster than everybody saying yes. I think Claire, there's a lot of support for that conversation. Like I said, it's an extremely complex tool, but very powerful if a jurisdiction can figure out how to use it. So
thanks. And I think that Federal Way may have some experience as well that maybe we could invite them to speak to at that point. So I'll follow up with them. Those are all my announcements. Thank you.
Right. Anything for the good of the order? Sean, were you waving or were you saying you had something?
No, I was just saying we didn't have anything in Maple Valley, and we're working with Claire to work out some details and hopefully get some stuff moving forward pretty soon.
Perfect. All right. I'm not seeing any hands raised or anybody coming off of mute. Thank you everyone for taking the time on this Friday afternoon. Oh, yep. Brian says they're right in the middle of it right now. So I love it. It's something I know we're talking about in Kent, trying to figure out exactly how do we define the area and what makes the most sense. So I think there's a lot of details there that would be helpful. If there is nothing else for the good of the order, Patience.
Hi, Mayor. I would love to just take an opportunity to extend an invitation to all of you in South King County to our Richard and Leah Rothstein afternoon, where they will be discussing their new book, Just Action, which is a follow-up to The Color of Law that many of you have likely read, that really deliberated on the government policies that we know led to residential segregation. And now they're looking at ways that we can, at a local level, really build up movements that can get us to a place of seeing change. And this will be in partnership with many of our organizational partners in the Black Home Initiative work. So we hope to see you. It is on November 2nd It's going to be at Seattle University at 2 p.m. and I've posted in the link here an invitation to all of you.
Thank you very much, Patience. Anything else? Going once, twice. All right, we are adjourned. Have a fabulous afternoon and a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you.